The culture session of Jeju has focused on a variety of international culture issues and encouraged a range of meaningful discussions. Today, the session is jointly organized by the Jeju Provincial Office as well as the Jeju Foundation Arts and Culture. Today, under the theme of Beyond Boundaries Towards a Sustainable Future, we invited renowned writers to talk about the spread of hatred, discrimination, and various conflicts in the era of pandemic. And before we start the session, we have the member of the Jeju Congress, Mr. Park Won-chul. He graduated from Jeju University and he majored in administration. And also, he is the chair of the Autonomy and Decentralization Committee of the Jeju Special Self-Governing Council. And also, he is the chair of the Legislative Evaluation Committee of the Jeju Special Self-Governing Council as well. And also president of the Jeju Sustainable Development Research Association, and also the chair of the Policy Committee of the Jeju branch of the Democratic Party. And at the moment, he is a member of the Culture, Tourism, and Sports Committee of the 11th Jeju Special Self-Governing Council. Please welcome Mr. Park Won-chul for his welcoming speech.
First of all, prior to joining this venue, I tried to write a speech, but I decided not to make a complete script for the speech because I'm not so sure that simultaneous interpretation would be possible or not, but actually, I'm quite nervous because important celebrities are with us together. And about 4 weeks ago, I got vaccinated for COVID. And can I just put off my facial mask because I got vaccinated? Oh, I'm sorry. I have to wear the facial mask first. And as you are well aware, back in 2007, Jeju was designated as the island of world peace. And at that time, with the theme of world peace and Jeju Island, we established a peace forum. And that was the beginning point of Jeju Forum. And this year marks the 16th year of the forum. And various topics and themes were dealt during the forums, and today we will focus more on literature. And I was really happy that based on a lot of efforts of the audiences and Jeju citizens, we could upgrade the qualification and status of Jeju Island. In particular, today's topic shows us the lessons to pursue change. We believe that Jeju Island will play the pivotal role in making changes. So the peace institutions and other organizers, I would like to thank you all for your efforts. And in particular, Mr. Kang Yong-jun, who is preparing for the Literature Museum in Jeju. I know that you're so busy and you are not sparing your sweats and blood over the establishment of the museum. Thank you. And thank you for your constructive feedback for the advancement of culture of Jeju Island. And Mr. Kang Deok-hwan, who is just like my brother. I'm really delighted to be with you in the session today. And I brought a book here today. Which, this is a book written by the great author of Eun Hee-kyung. Actually, I'm sorry that I could not read this book yet. But yesterday I had a pleasant dialogue with the author of this book, and I was really happy and honored to meet you. So here in our daily lives, there are a lot of values hidden in our daily lives, and in reality these days we are still missing the values that we pursued before, especially gender minorities, races, and generations have their own conflicts these days. So not only Jeju society, but the entire Korean society are witnessing the emergence of issues like gender issue or Me Too movement, etc. So under the circumstances, we have to seek out a way to solve the current issues. So regarding this, I hope today's event will serve as a good opportunity to share our values and ideas. And at the council level, provincial council level, we will try to support you fully. So thank you. Thank you for your remarks. Mr. Park Won-chul from the Provincial Council of Jeju Province. Thank you for your insightful remarks. And let's kick off the session in full swing from now on. For this session, let me introduce the panels for this session. Moderator is the writer of the World Culture and Beyond, and he's a tourist. He's a traveler, global traveler, Mr. Go Myung-chul. Let's give him a big round of hands. And the next presenter is the author of a lot of novels and Korean literature, and she's really a well-known writer for Korean readers. Recently, she published her new novel, which was awarded for the 19th Oh Young-soo Literature Award. And the next presenter is also a famous author in the Chinese literature market, and she also receives the most renowned literature award of Ru Xin. Miss Ru Min, let's give her a big round of hands. Nice to meet you, Ru Min. And the next presenter is who received the award, various literature awards with the brilliant works of literature. Here is the Korean renowned poet and professor of Korean literature at Jeju University, Ms. Jang Hae-jin. Mr. Jang Hae-jin, let's give him a big round of hands. Lastly, there is a literature critic who is really active in Asian region, and she also wrote journals and papers regarding the UK literature, and he also has been the literature professor for top-tier universities of Korea. Gato Yasuko, the culture critique from Japan. Let's give her a big round of hands. So let's begin the session. So the moderator, Mr. Go Myung-chul, the floor is yours.
Hello, everyone. In fact, the topic of this session is Beyond Boundaries Toward Sustainability. As you may understand, since last year, we have been going through unprecedented crisis. And we ask ourselves if sustainability can be actually realized in the actual daily lives. And I think this is a common issue all around the world. This session was hosted by Jejuporam, And every novelist and poet are struggle to solve this problem, but the participants here will share their stories, how they are trying to find sustainability in their writings. Despite the time is quite limited, I believe the session will be meaningful to all of us. It's regrettable that I'm not able to give much time for presentation, but let me give you 8 minutes. And also, during the discussion, we can give you common question as well as individual question respectively. First presenter is a renowned novelist in Korea, one of the best novelists, Miss Eun Hee-kyung. Let's give her a big round of applause. Hello, I am novelist Eun Hee-kyung. The importance of my presentation is to be punctual. I have to finish my presentation in 8 minutes. Let me read my presentation. Since the breakout of the COVID-19 pandemic, violence against Asians has been taking place all across the world. During this disastrous situation, human prejudice and selfishness rooted in hatred have been put into action without being filtered by intelligence and ethics. This phenomenon has already been foreshadowed by the conservative attitude of European nations towards accepting refugees and the emergence of far-right leaders. The conflicts between genders and classes that are taking place in Korea these days, and also between different classes and different political opinions, also stem from the same root. Prejudice and selfishness are shown throughout the society. Whatever social issue arises, it is judged by the profit and loss of individuals rather than by the common good of the civil society. More danger is posed by SNS and the political world. So the feminism has become a provocative topic on personal platforms and social media. And the selfishness of the vested interests, disguised as justice, are solidifying a sense of class distinction. I believe behind this phenomenon lies a lack of reason, which is the failure to find one's true identity. The rise of neoliberalism around the world undermined our question toward gender, academy, and personal connections. I'm afraid people forgot how to live in the society. They put too much focus on money and greed. They don't try to identify themselves, but they categorize themselves based on economic circle. As a result, someone who's different from them and new things, people became quite not adaptive to new things and even become violent. They are trapped in the era of hatred. But the literature is to study human beings. In order to realize happiness, we need to realize who we are. To do so, we need to explore about human beings. But it's all about studying others. Ignorance could be violence. When the Black Lives Matter happened in last year, I was reminded of what Romain Gary told in his book White Dog. Listen to me carefully, my friend. I wouldn't say you shouldn't bite black people. What I'm saying is that you must not bite only black people. Because he was telling this to a white dog who was trained to bite only black people. Being trained to bite someone shows the hatred of human beings. The history of violence is also the history of hatred. Hatred is caused by lack of studying human beings and lack of sympathy. We never understand others 100%. Our heart is never stopped because of others' sadness. But we feel sad when we realize our limitations. And based on this sadness, we try to understand others' sadness. And what should be the standard to understand others? What kind of leverage of understanding could we apply? To the novelist Romain Gary, it was individualism. He also says that he is a jerk not because he's a black man, but he's a jerk because he is a jerk. So before right and wrong, seeing a person as a black person could be the translation of people based on skin color and prejudice. And I'd like to explain this as mirror and book. But literature is not a mirror that reflects one's appearance, but it is also a door that leads to another world. True empathy is not just looking at ourselves, but realizing there are people who are different from me. We need to see others as entities that have a unique identity. I think that's the true understanding of human beings and true humanism. There are various differences: skin color, religion, gender. However, the biggest difference between people is the unique identity. No matter what kind of identity we have, we are all human beings. This was also reflected in my novel. I think literature is something that returns the originality to human beings because we are faced with irresponsible frames that are exposed by social media and news agencies. However, literature takes care of evil people and a vulnerable class in order to understand human beings. In order to recognize others as someone with originality and identity, we need to look back on ourselves. Although we fail, we need to keep trying. Otherwise, it's meaningless to say that I'm in love with someone. That's why loving is a studying. That's very sad. The beginning of literature is humanism. Humanism is also the process of proving myself that has come from this base.
I am really wondering how this remark was received by the audience in the floor. And actually, we don't have any set framework for today's session because all the creators, poets, and writers can make their own presentations. So, Eunhee-kyung's presentation touches on very essential issues such as hatred and error and the fallacies of hatred in the Korean society was talked during her presentation. And nowadays no one really have a sympathy over others, and this is quite a big issue, and we have to open any possibility and potential to have sympathy over others. And Mr. 심영철, who has the same letter in our in the name with me, and the second presentation will be done virtually, connecting China. So Ms. Ruming will deliver her presentation with interesting topic. Let's give her a big round of hands. Hi, Rumi. Hi, would you please start your presentation? Nice to meet you. Can you hear me? Can you hear me well? Yep, I can hear you clearly. Let me begin my presentation. First of all, thank you for inviting me to Jejuporam. And in this era of post-COVID, a lot of ideas were shared by Eunhee-kyung, and I'm really lucky not to wear a mask, although I cannot meet you but face to face. And this forum has long history of 15 or 16 years, and under these difficulties, you are still continuing this event, and that's really touching and impressive. So today, with the topic of generation, I would like to share some talks with you. So in China, the word generation is translated as 대, and it's not literally the same with the word generation. And there are a lot of newly emerging leaders in the Chinese society. They are providing a new perspective and new angle to interpret the society, and there are a lot of arena and venues for exchanging ideas and views on society. Socialists toward the academia who majored in sociology analyze a generation to deepen the understanding on the society, and those who were born after 1985 and after 1995 and 2005. So in the unit of 10 years, the generations are divided, and that's related to the rapid development of China. So this is like playing video. The speed of play is quite rapid, like 1.2 times or 1.5 times, and even 2 times. So that means the rapid development of the society, and that broadens the gap between generations under the circumstances. In this unique environment of China, the generational issues are emerging too. So different features and characteristics are shown and witnessed by generations. Let me take an example. Back in those who were born in 1950s or 60s, they were born when China was really poor. At that time, they lived collectively, and they cherished the tradition of family, and they thought it's mandatory to have children. But the campaign of one family, one kid was launched to control the population. So with the theme of this, a Chinese writer wrote a novel titled Frog. This is about the social control policies of the Chinese government. So those who were born after 1990s are only kid for their family. So just for one kid, a lot of grown-ups were mobilized to take care of the kid. So for the kid of this generation, the identity and the social and economic concepts and the concepts of cooperation and sharing could be quite difficult and different compared to their parent generation. So what was really interesting was that when they got married from the year of 2013, the birth control policy has been being mitigated. So a family can have up to two children, or these days they are considering to allow three kids. So the viewpoints on marriage, gender, and giving birth had been modernized, and that are quite different from that of the parent generation. So they are reluctant to bear many children. There is a gap between generation and policies, and that's quite interesting. So the feature of generation could be shed light upon from the viewpoint of writer, because this has impact on my writing career. I was born in 1970s and I was grown up in a rural area, and I moved to a small city, and then I entered into a big city, finally Beijing, and I also had an opportunity to go a lot of big cities all over the world. So this is not just about geological movement, but this means the changes in mentality, emotion. So these type of changes were shared by other writers of my generation. And that was the era of big change in China. So the industry has developed by leaps and bounds, and this type of big changes in the society were reflected in my writing. This is the reason that our generation's writing is quite different from that of the previous generation, because the previous generation writers focused more on land and soil because they were grown up in the agricultural area. So they are really excellent in depicting nature. However, my generation is kind of in the middle between the rural area and the urban area. And next generation who were born in the 80s are just converted into the internet generation. So they are living in the large cities, and they pioneered into the new genre of literature such as internet literature and SF and sci-fi. So there are a lot of readers of the next generation Chinese writers, and so through the different generations of Chinese writers, their features and characteristics are quite different. And there is a literature magazine in China, and they conducted a survey on the writers who were born after 1980s. And more than 100 writers participated in the survey. And according to the results from the survey, there is a variety of the channels that they got into the literature. There are some grassroots writers, and there are some writers who trained harshly in the universities, and there are some writers who grown up in overseas. So their different backgrounds influenced over the style of their literature. They participated in literature contests, and they posted internet novel on the websites, and they also collaborated with the visual arts works. So different methods are mobilized for them to get entered into the literature world. enthusiastic attitude and passion. They are trying to move forward to achieve their dream of becoming a famous writer. I would like to quote Ru Xin, a famous Chinese author. There are a lot of people and they are interconnected closely with me. This depicts the writing environment of China. No matter a background is depicted, no matter genre is written, the change and development is taking place really fast. And our times, our location, our region, and our generation are presented through the literature. That's why literature connects us, and that's where the power of literature lies in. And this is the only tradition that only literature have. So Korea, Japan, I hope our goal is the same because the goal of the writers are universal. That's all about my presentation. And thank you for listening. Thank you.
예, 참 흥미 있는 발제를 들었는데 우리가 중국을 잘 알고 있다고 하지만
It was quite an interesting topic. We believe we know Chinese very well, but we do not actually know about Chinese. When we go look into the Chinese community, we can realize that there are huge gap between the generations of Chinese people. And listening to the presentation, I remember that the potential of young authors in China are tremendous. And I realized that the authors are eager to share their stories to the world. Next presenter, right beside me, we have Mr. Jang Ijed, a renowned poet in Korea. He also presents a very interesting topic. He has 8 minutes. Please be punctual. Hello, I am Jang Iji. My presentation deck is too long to be covered in 8 minutes. Today I'm going to talk about reproduction in ethics. So in the modern literature in Korea, authors are based on homosexuality and feminism. Korean readers expect literature to play a moral and public role in our society because we have gone through long-standing dictatorship under the military regime, and that's why people wanted literature to play such an active role. But recently, we have made radical changes in the literature landscape in Korea. There have been some plagiarism issue and queer literature, and based on this trend, many of the Korean readers also were disappointed with the development of Korean literature. So on the one hand, people expect higher level of morality from the literature, but on the other side, there are many literatures focusing on homosexuality and feminism, especially in poetry. There are 3 poets who have gay identity. They won many literature-related prizes, and I'd like to explain this phenomenon. First one is Hwang In-chan. He is a poet. I also participated in the critique of the second poet. He came out as a gay in his second poet. if you have a chance to read it, he publicly say about the cure, and I recognize that he is quite an ambitious man. He shows his ambition to become a renowned author by saying this homosexuality to the public. Under this man-centered society, he might have been neglected or ignored. So in the literature, he may be fighting against this prejudice toward homosexuality. And also we have a poet named Jung In-ho. Recently, he published his poet. It's all about confession about his own homosexuality. I think this kind of format is quite familiar for Korean literature lovers. Third, we have Lee Gi-ri. He is an amateur, but won the Kim Soo-young Literature Award. Quite a news. This poet shares the violence toward himself. So he underwent much violence as a homosexual person. There are multiple scenes where we feel uncomfortable because of such high level of violence. Anyways, these authors with homosexuality are recognized by the public, and I think the fact that we are recognizing these people as authors is a significant change in our society. Whether we recognize them or not, we are destined to make relationship with these people. And also we need to talk about feminism. I have two pieces to share with you today. One short novel and also another short novel on feminism. There were two sentences. I was the only passenger that took off from the train. If we look into the sentence, it's quite ambiguous if this means we were in a dream or not. Because if it was a dream, this piece of literature is the reality. And if it was a reality, this story in this novel was a dream. So it could be a dream dreamed by many people. So the message of the author is that women under the man-centered society underwent high level of violence. Sometimes women are murdered by their boyfriends or spouses. Korean women living in Korean society are going through a common nightmare. So it's a nightmare shared by many women in Korea. So the format of this novel is based on dreamed by the author. However, it reflects a lot from our reality. In that regard, this piece is quite meaningful. And the other piece shows two organs, smiling teeth and a belly button. This woman, a main role of the novel, ends up with quite unfortunate event. This woman is isolated from the society, but this woman sees herself through a mirror that a broadcasting company staff member left for her. When a woman's identity is denied by others, if this kind of lifestyle maintained, she is destined to ignore her body, and all of a sudden she realized that her body is her own. And this is the moment where this woman, this isolated woman, realized that her body is her own. So further discussion will be made in the discussion time.
그 요즘에 특히요.
These days in Korean society,
가장 역사적 우리의 그 수면위로 부각한 게이 성소수자 페미니즘입니다.
this LGBT issue has been quite a popular issue to be debated. The feminism we all know is kind of outdated because there have been a lot of progress in the discussion about the definition of feminism. So within a short time, he explained about the homosexuality and feminism in the Korean literature. But under the Confucian-oriented society, homosexuality and feminism have been kind of neglected. But in the literature circle, our authors are trying to find the true meaning of homosexuality and feminism, not only in Korean literature, but in the global literature. And I think it was quite meaningful to raise this issue in Jejuporam. Last presenter we have is another literature critic like myself, Kato Asuko from Japan.
I'm Kato Asuko, and I'm currently working as a professor at a Japanese university, and I'm really grateful that you invited me to this meaningful forum with the topic of pandemic. I would like to deliver a small presentation for you. There are 7 regions that announced a urgent situation, state of urgency in April last year due to the widespread of COVID-19, and the state was finished on May 25. And from then, a lot of theatrical performances were resumed. However, there are a lot of still lingering issues of social distancing and quarantine. So the authorities set up a new quarantine principles, and they limited the accommodation of the audiences at theater by 15%. And the audiences could not talk each other, and they could not eat something. And under this heightened tension, we had to appreciate the performance. So under the circumstances, the drama was seized and delayed. So among the circumstances, I would like to point out 2 things on the pandemic situation and drama performance. First idea is that we have to refer to the British theater life. So there has been a lot of drama plays of Shakespeare's and other famous authors, and they just changed the gender of the characters in the drama. So small stages were fully moved, and the standing audiences could feel like they are actually getting into a forest. That's a production out of the box. So by changing the gender of the character, they made people to think about the gender issue of the current society. And by effectively using the pop song of Beyonce, they just highlighted the theme of the drama. And the audiences were allowed to have wine glass on hand, and they could move through the storyline of the drama, so they could be really free during the performance, and they could just lower the barriers between the actors and the audience, and the atmosphere is like a festival. And via video, they had to comply with the social distancing rule, and it was quite ironic that this type of new trial for art was made under the circumstances of pandemic. And due to pandemic, they had to cease the performance, and they went online. And this is a global trend. So in Japan, kabuki or bunrak and other type of traditional performances are aired online. And for a certain period, they are for free. And after that period, the audience need to pay. And this is getting settled as a new type of performance appreciation. So they are trying to get closer to the audience, and online video conference are converged with the art performance. So for example, in February, Ibo Hobe produced the tragedy of Rome, showed a very avant-garde style of performance, and that could be a challenge toward the media. So as of now, Noda Hideki's performance is aired on TV, and fake peer, which means fake Shakespeare. So faced with the pandemic situation, they are trying to identify and define what the drama play can do. This is quite a new topic for the art lovers, and this marks the beginning point for all the art lovers to think about the original role of the art performance. And the story is derived from a actual accident that took place in Japan about tens of years ago, and very sad lines were quoted as it was on stage. And they are just trying to experimenting whether the drama can go beyond the stage. However, this type of vivid and graphic lines could be infused with the screenplay, but it took more than 30 years to be realized. So the contemporary people of Noda Hideki, who is in middle age, went to the theater to watch the play. So among many generations, it was really amazing to see the artwork, which revitalizes the language that was actually used about 30 years ago. So this is like the convergence between fiction and non-fiction. So even after the end of the pandemic nowadays, after 30 years, 50 years, or 50 years, we can learn from the pandemic, or we can learn from the masterpiece born in the era of pandemic, and that could be shared among generations. So moving beyond the barrier or going beyond the border means that someone or something is waiting for us. So for drama play, going beyond era, gender, space, or media, or generation, we can connect together, and we can connect the dots together continuously so that the future would be created. That's all from me. Thank you. Thank you. As a literature critic, she just made an impressive presentation in a short time, focused on the drama play in Japan. We have to think about the difficulties that the art sector is having now due to the pandemic. So that's the case with Korean artists too. So it's really hard to revive the current situation on stage. And the Japanese artists tried to revive the current situation on stage by mobilizing different tools of the media or technology. It was really meaningful. So regardless of generation and the media, we can go beyond any borders and we can prepare for the era after the COVID pandemic. She opened a new chapter for the artists. I'm so grateful for her insightful presentation. Due to the limits in time, we have to move forward. And I have a question to all the presentations. Given the forum's topic, so the topic of the forum is about beyond the boundaries towards a sustainable future. What's sustainable future? We have to make our own definition for the literature sector. So the sustainable future refers to, I don't believe that that's only in the field of social science. There are a lot of new intelligence such as AI and other things. So this is also interconnected to the economic values and ecosystem. And I believe that all the people from the literature will have sympathy over my view that. So regarding the topic of the forum, what's the impact and influence of the forum over the literature? Would you give us the answer in order?
In fact, I feel hatred about people many times in a day. There was a passage of Anti-Discrimination Act in the National Assembly in Korea a few days ago. And the request for this legal action was supported by 100,000 people. But a couple of days later, another 100,000 people voted against the act. But still, I'm hopeful for our society. In the literature I love, we never give up on people. We all are in a dumping station, but some of us are seeing the stars in the sky. Because every human being is quite a complicated entity and they have their own identity. So the concept that everyone is different has to be understood within the literature. That's the answer I prepared. But I'd like to add to the presentation by Jang Yi-ji. I believe feminism and homosexuality are two important matters that need to be highlighted in Korean literature. I think these kind of efforts to mention these two topics will improve our circumstances. So naturally, she highlighted the significance of Jang Yi-ji's presentation. So I'd like to ask this common question to Lumin in China. Well, thank you. When I first saw this topic, I paid attention to the sustainability of literature because in China we often talk about the sustainability of literature. We should think about the economic perspective and social perspective. But at the same time, in China, we talk these social issues like reducing population. This kind of social issues are discussed from literature perspective as well. And many people are eager to read books. Of course, these days robots can write their own literature. And I'm afraid that the landscape for writers is getting narrowed. So some are quite not positive at all about the future of the literature. However, I am optimist. The sustainability of literature is available from the economic, social, and technological aspect. And the main focus here in the literature has to be on humans. Where humans are, we need stories, especially stories about love, discussions about love. That's the power of literature and what the literature tries to deliver. Think about a huge vessel. We don't know the destination of this boat, but within this huge boat, we need to make sure that this boat keeps floating. I think this is the ultimate power of human beings. Whatever the technological development is, I think literature would be accompanied with human beings till the very end. So we are on a huge boat together. We should make sure that this boat does not sink, and we have to survive on this boat. That's why we are here to talk about sustainability. Next, I'd like to ask the same question to Mr. Zhang Ji. After pandemic, the hatred and discrimination on Asians are happening around the world. We are witnessing that. You all know that within the DNA of our history, we already have this discrimination and exclusion embedded in the history. I'm not sure if the entity of such activities is clear. I mean, we may be one of those who are making discrimination against each other. So already a century ago, people explored differences of each other. However, still today we are putting too much focus on difference. Literature is, as Lu Min explained, all about the exploration of love. By finding myself in the literature, we can make an opportunity to love someone else. Vaccine matters, however, literature matters more.
시인으로서 백신도 중요하지만
As a poet, he made quite a rhythmical statement here.
기술적인 것들에 대한 이 탐구,
Exploration of difference
그리고 있는 은경 연설의 말씀에도 타자에 대한 공감이보다
and also sympathy for others
아마 잠시
have something to do with each other.
내 안에 있는
And
그 이질적인 것마저도
even the evil aspect of myself should be explored in order to find the real self. Lastly, let's ask the common question to Ms. Kato.
このパンデミックが
이 팬데믹 같은 경우는 처음 시작되었을 when the pandemic was broke out for the first time, people thought it was really
카뮤の小説ペストが書
The Stranger, the Camus novel, has become a bestseller again due to the pandemic breakout. It means that literature is a shared place of the previous generation that could be understood to the next generation. So even after 50 years and 100 years, the value of the literature will be preserved. Modern medical service is about to generate vaccine, and that's a big deal. But literature still has influence after 15 years and 100 years. So the vibe of the literature could survive after a long time, and the influence of the literature is maintained even after a long time. And this is the reason that literature can create sustainable future, and it can maintain the sustainability. Thank you for your insightful answer. So that's the 해송됐다 of the literature in a very meaningful but easy way to understand. So that's the main role of literature. So why we are doing literature, why we have to write something to express our thoughts, why is it even more important than vaccine? And now we have to take a look at the theoretical side. During the first presentation of Eun-hee-kyung, I just generated a question from the presentation of Eun-hee-kyung. So think about the uniqueness and the personality of people should be returned to the people. That's what you highlighted, Eun-hee-kyung. And when you think about how can we return the uniqueness and the basic characteristics of literature to individuals? Let's suppose that an individual pursue the truth, but the truth of the pursuit of truth could blind the individual, and then he or she will have a distorted view on history or life. So sometimes thinking of the truth of a individual could be really dangerous. So could you add something more regarding the pursuit of truth? That will be helpful for us to deepen our understanding on your idea. So other people cannot exist out of the context of sociology and politics. This is the reason that the contexts are never conflict together, in my opinion. And the individuality, the term that I use right now, is not about naturalism or not the individualism. This is quite different concept. And it just means that we should not make a person fit in a certain type of frame. So nothing like gender minority, nothing like female, nothing like race. We just have to interpret one as an individual. That's what I wanted to highlight. And in this regard, I always say that we have to study others, which means that we have to try to understand other identity. Let's think about the metamorphosis of Kafka. This is not a mere story of Gregory. He died tragically, but this is not all about this novel. The novel contains more because it reflects the social economic structure of that time as a salesperson, as a son of a family who tried desperately to survive under the social context, and he became a insect, and the family members at first got a shock, but they turned their attitude and they just expressed their hatred toward him, and it reveals the tragedy derived from the social structure. So this is not just about individual truth. This is about the social and political context that surrounds the individual.
좀 부연
So, thanks to the additional explanation, I think average readers will have a better understanding now.
작가들이 어떤 특정한 캐릭터를
When a certain character is created by a poet or a novelist, we have a certain background setting, like what political opinion this person has, but it doesn't represent the unique characteristic of this character. I mean, politics and personal uniqueness are different concepts.
이제 또 다른 걸 배워갈게요. 다른 분에 대해서
I'd like to ask other questions to other author, to Lunin in China. Your presentation was interesting. You mentioned that young generation of readers in China. It was reflected on the presentation you shared.
운명적인 예전에 이룩하지 못했던 것들을 많이 이제 이룩하고 있고 실제로 젊은 세대들이
And these days, the young generation are enjoying the benefits of the modernity.
세대 작가들이
For young generation authors, the tremendous growth in China must be something impressive to even young generation. But as an author from rural area, the exponential growth must be more dramatic from your perspective. So as a senior author in China, what do you think these young generation authors are putting focus while they writing their books? Thank you for your good question. As Ms. Eun Hee-kyung mentioned, I agree with her answer, and it was quite impressive. Young people in China, as you mentioned, experience such rapid economic growth. So these young people don't understand the poverty and hardship that we experienced in the rural area. And when we write books, I think there is a huge difference between young generation and old generation like myself. Because these young authors feel a great deal of pride about the exponential growth, so they focus on patriotism in the literature. That's the reality of China. You may be surprised by the great deal of pride expressed by these young authors, and also their affection to the literature is a lot lighter than the old generation. The old generation authors were equipped with in-depth thoughts and much affection to the literature because we had many more opportunities to think about ourselves and think about the society. But the young generation authors have much lighter approaches on the literature. That way, they may be protecting the pure aspect of literature itself. But I believe they are having more casual attitude towards the literature, unlike the old generation. And also, when they decide to decide a topic, I think they are less impacted by the Western literature. Those who were born after 1980s, they have been much interested in the traditional literature of China and ancient stage performance and other historic pieces. For example, as you know, the traditional opera, traditional play of China, these traditional values are cherished by these young people within the landscape of literature. That's the attitude of the young generation, which is quite different from the old generation authors. Another difference is that the young generation who were born after 1980s are much affected by the internet. I'd like to share a data with you here. In 2020, I looked into the cyber literature related data. The number of cyber literature authors reached 600,000 in China. They are aggressively making literature on the cyberspace. Among them, those who were born after 1995 make up 75%. So they create their writings and their literature. And for them, online platform is a channel to realize their dream to become an author. So in this cyber literature space, 140 pieces were transformed into films and drama. So this trend to make web literature-based drama is quite a popular trend. Thank you.
예, 팬데믹 시대가
So I believe pandemic could be an opportunity to us as well.
직접 초청을 해서
It is regrettable that we were not able to invite you to Korea in person, but thankfully we were able to listen to you and understand the new trend in China. Interestingly,
한번 글쎄요. 동의하시는지 모르겠습니다만
Korea's case
젊은 소설 속에서는
is
우리 아까
a little bit different. You may disagree with me,
그런 부분들이
but the Korean traditional aspects
예전에 3, 4세대들은
tend to be neglected in the modern literature in Korea.
원본을 만들어내고 애를 썼다면 요즘에 한국 젊은
The
작가들
young generation in Korea
시중에 나와 있는 어떤 뭐
tends to focus on new platform like webtoon and more trendy media.
젊은 작가들과 한국의 젊은
I
작가들
think
미묘한
this is the delicate difference between Chinese young generation and Korean young generation. So I'd like to ask another question to Mr. Jang Ji. On behalf of you, I'd like to ask this question.
하필 한국의 젊은 이 시인들이
Young poets in Korea
사회에 대해서 왜 이렇게 유달리 관심을
are paying attention to homosexuality,
썼어야
but
될
why?
연구가 훨씬 더 많은데
There could be other topics more interesting.
이 질문과
I'd like to ask this question straightforward,
다음에 열심히
and
박사가
also I'd like to
우리가 이제 성에
ask.
대한 논문들이
So when it comes to sexualism, or not sexualism, but feminism,
혁신하고 뗄 수가 없거든요.
it feminism and politics go hand in hand
이 정신 분석학 내지 그냥 뭐 성에 대해서 갖고 있는
because both are based on psychology of human beings. The human spirit is based on sex.
현실 속에서 어떤 사회 현실의 정치적인 부분과 모럴적인 부분들과
So the moral aspect
연관이 될 수밖에 없습니다.
and politics and the feminism are all rooted in in one cause. So I'd like to ask why this young generation is focusing on homosexuality. This is quite difficult question to answer. It's not just a curiosity about queer culture, but this queer culture has been there all the time. Started from Glorio to the recent attention to the queer culture. I think it is meaningful that authors themselves are coming out as homosexual people. And for the listen ear, I believe many major magazines in Korea have featured queer-related stories. I think it reflects the prolonged pressure on homosexuality in Korean society, and this is reflected also in the novels in Korea. If we define a cause of this homosexuality-related literature, I think it's not about something that happened first and then the other is happening because of the first one.
여러분 생각해 보시면은 그냥 연쇄살인 영화가 아니라 한편으로는 그
The Silence of Ships is not just a movie about serial killer. By capturing a serial killer, this woman became an FBI member. But this serial killer calls this woman to ask if the ships are silent. This indicates that women, not all women, are breaking the glass ceiling to become a successful woman. So this is not about gender confrontation, but humanity and human rights. And also there could be many different kinds of sexual identities.
좀더 듣고 싶은 얘기인데 흘러가 계신 분들
I like to listen to your opinion more. It is quite unfortunate that we have limited time only. I'd like to ask another question to
연극은 물론 그 대본도 있습니다만 연기자들이 직접 몸으로 하는
Ms. Asuko in Japan. The stage performance is expressed by body and many multiple factors at the same time.
우리 문학이라는 것이 문자
The literature
강의식도 얘기했는데
is expressed by these letters.
깊이 들어가다 보면은 문자 중심주의 문자로만
But this man-centered culture is originated from this letter-centered literature because only when you know these letters you can create literature. But stage performance is not centered on letters, but body gesture, music, and other art aspects. So I think stage performance can be a good alternative of literature. So I'd like to ask your take on this.
そうです。
So the expression based on letters and similar lines of drama play and the action are the two different key factors, and that's quite attractive approach. And Shakespeare's drama play that I introduced before demonstrates the power of voice and narration. So in this modern society, the expression based on letters are kind of losing powers because more and more people tend to get appealed by voice, and more delicate and detailed expression could be possible via voice. That's the charming point of voice expression. Of course, there are a lot of people from the literature circle. You are focused on novel, poem, and other letter-based expressions, and you are just devoting yourself for literature. I know that. However, verbal message, narration, or voice can be even broader than letter expressions. It contains a lot of elements of the individual, such as background and characteristics and others. So the expression of diversity could be effectively delivered by verbal expression. And physical expression has more power than letter expression. So these are the elements that can contribute to literature and that can have any type of influence. And within the huge boundary of literature, a lot of things could be done. There's no fixed definition. However, when you are faced with a passionate or experimental artworks, you will feel that the concepts are being realized right now. Thank you for your insightful message. And today, a lot of creators are gathered to this venue, and within your daily life in this era of pandemic, how do you respond to your writing career, and how can you make a sustainable literature as a creator? A lot of meaningful ideas were exchanged through this venue, such as gender issue and cultural issue and minority issues. So we have a lot of tasks to open the new chapter in this field. As the schedule, we are slightly over the schedule by 4 minutes. So Actually, we planned to open the floor to get questions from the audience. Any staff here, if you give us the sign, I will just invite one person for a question. Okay? Okay. So you can ask any question to any of our presenters. So if you have any question, please raise your hand. Only one person. So no one? Okay, thank you. So the 16th Jeju Forum for Peace and Prosperity delivered a crucial message for a literature field. Not only social message, political message, or economic message. The vaccination of literature can change drastically our lives because that gives us the power to tolerate the current tragic situation. So thank you all the presenters for today. Let's give them a big round of hands. Thank you. Thank you for your discussion. This marks the end of today's culture session today. So here, Diamond A Hall will be closed after today's session because this was the last session today. Thank you for your attending. Thank you.